In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King patronizes a ceremony in honor of the winners of the King Abdullah Prize for the World Interfaith Harmony Week, marked worldwide in the first week of February each year. Pope John XXIII and Pope John Paul II are proclaimed saints in a historic double papal canonization in front of some hundreds of thousands of pilgrims in the Vatican. And South Africa marks 2 decades of multiracial democracy in their first Freedom Day since the passing of Nelson Mandela. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. A ceremony in honor of the winners of the King Abdullah Prize for the World Interfaith Harmony Week was held today under the patronage of His Majesty the King at the Husseiniya Palace. In attendance were a number of royal family members as well as religious leaders and scholars from across the world. The prize was launched last year to recognize 3 outstanding activities marking the World Interfaith Harmony Week, which takes place during the first week of February each year. We get more in this report.
Proposed by King Abdullah during the 65th United Nations General Assembly session in 2010, the World Interfaith Harmony Week was unanimously adopted by the UN and is now being observed by countries worldwide through a variety of events. The initiative seeks to spread the love of God and the love of the neighbor irrespective of one's belief, or love of good and the love of the neighbor for those without a faith, to promote peace, tolerance and mutual understanding among all nations worldwide. Addressing the ceremony, Patriarch Theophilus III, Patriarch of the Holy City, Palestine and Jordan, said each year commitment to the goals and ideas of the World Interfaith Harmony Week has increased around the world and has contributed to the transformation of the life of local communities, especially those under pressure.
This action crowned over a decade of commitment by the General Assembly to focus the attention of the world in the creation of a culture of peace-building, non-violence and mutual understanding among the faithful of different religious traditions, and it also highlighted the commitment of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan to this crucial endeavor.
Over 400 events took place across the world, from lectures, seminars, workshops, films, and sporting events to learnings from peace through interfaith understanding worldwide. 63 applications were submitted for deliberation by the panel of judges chaired by Her Royal Highness Princess Arish Ghazi. Speaking on behalf of the winners, Father Sebastiano from the Philippines said observing the World Interfaith Harmony Week is mandated by a Republic Act and enjoys wide participation despite the difficult political conditions in the country.
Welcome the new initiative with great joy because we believe in this approach. And since the beginning, we have emphasized a dialogue and peace approach based on love of God, love of neighbor, and love of common good.
His Majesty handed the prizes to the winners and received a medal from the panel of judges. The first prize went to the Silsila Dialogue movement in the Philippines. The second prize went to the Center of Peace and Human Rights in India, while the third prize was shared between the Jamal Farghali Secondary School for Boys in Egypt and the Faith Together in Uganda. Faraj Looney for the News at 10.
Separately, His Majesty received UNRWA Commissioner General Filippo Grande, whose 4-year term ended late March, to hand over his duties to Swiss national Pierre Cranboul. King Abdullah praised Grande's remarkable efforts during his tenure in Jordan, highlighting the agency's crucial role in providing relief assistance to refugees in the region. His Majesty also pledged Jordan's continued support to UNRWA in pursuing its humanitarian services to Palestinian refugees. Grande, an Italian, joined the agency in 2005 as Deputy Commissioner General and assumed the leadership in 2010. His term in office saw a major crisis for Palestinian refugees, the Lebanon War in 2006, the Gaza fighting in 2008 and 9, as well as the ongoing conflict in Syria. A Japanese parliamentary delegation on a visit to Jordan met with His Majesty the King to discuss ways of furthering bilateral cooperation, especially in parliamentary and legislative affairs. The meeting also dealt with regional issues, namely the stalled peace negotiations between the Palestinians and Israelis and the Syria crisis. His Majesty reiterated Jordan's calls for a two-state solution as the only means to resolve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. On Syria, he urged for a political solution that would end the suffering of the Syrian people, also highlighting the growing burdens on Jordan being the host of the largest number of Syrian refugees. The parliamentary delegation also met with House Speaker Atef Tarawne, who briefed them on the effect of the war in Syria on Jordan's economy and on the security situation at borders in light of terrorist threats. Our own Jordan television celebrates today its 46th anniversary. 46 years ago, His Majesty the late King Hussein signaled the launch of transmission at the station in al-Hiran. A celebration is taking place this minute in the station's gardens under the patronage of Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour and the presence of a host of former anchors and retired senior staff. The celebration kicked off with the army band playing national music, followed by theater and music performances with the participation of Jordanian artists including Malik Barmawi, the Ramtha folklore troops, and the Jordan Radio Music Orchestra. A number of Muslim and Christian religious scholars, parliamentarians, and politicians from across the Arab and Muslim world are scheduled to attend the Road to Jerusalem conference, which opens in Amman tomorrow and continues until Wednesday. The event is organized by the World Islamic Sciences and Educational University, the Lower House Palestine Committee, and the Muslim World League. Delegates will tackle topics such as the religious significance of Al-Aqsa Mosque and other Muslim and Christian sites in Jerusalem, as well as ways in which the Arab and Muslim world and the international community can come to the aid of the occupied city. Her Majesty Queen Rania called on Iskan al-Jam'a Mixed Secondary School in Amman to check on progress of educational projects by the Jordan Education Initiative, currently implemented in a number of public schools across the kingdom. One project, Fursati lil-Tamayyuz, is an internship program launched last year to enhance employability skills of school and university students. While the second project, dubbed Demokrati, was launched by the King Abdullah Fund for Development to help young people build a national identity and positive attitudes and learn the skills of dialogue. During her visit, Queen Rania toured classrooms and observed students at work. She took part in a session by the Dialogue and Volunteerism clubs and also joined students attending a live broadcast on first aid conducted by the Civil Defense and being broadcast live to 5 schools in different governorates simultaneously. Hundreds of Iraqis living in Jordan participated in their country's parliamentary elections in Amman. Former interim Iraqi Prime Minister Iyad Allawi joined hundreds of Iraqis in Amman as they cast their votes. The parliamentary elections will mark Iraq's first since U.S. military forces withdrew from the country in 2011. Around 200,000 Iraqis are estimated to live in Jordan, and to help them exercise their constitutional right, 14 polling stations were set up around the kingdom, 11 in Amman, 1 in Irbid, and 2 in Zarqa. The polling in Jordan, which ends tomorrow, is being overseen by the Independent Electoral Commission as well as 3 international observer committees. The elections in Iraq are due to take place on Wednesday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has urged Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to tear up his pact with Hamas, saying Israel would not take part in Middle East peace talks with a Palestinian government backed by the Islamist group. President Abbas has to decide whether he wants a pact with Hamas or peace with Israel, Netanyahu said on the U.S. television program Face the Nation. Israel suspended U.S.-sponsored peace talks with the Palestinians on Thursday after Abbas announced a unity pact with Hamas, viewed by the United States, the European Union, and Israel as a terrorist organization. The UN Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons mission in Syria is considering to launch a fact-finding mission to investigate reports of chlorine gas attacks in the country. Leader of the organization overseeing the destruction of Syria's toxic stockpile made the statement in Damascus, calling on Syria to ensure the elimination of its chemical weapons program rapidly. Speaking at a news conference, Sigrid Kaag voiced hope that the 30th of June deadline for the destruction of chemical weapons will be met.
The risk of security conditions impacting negatively in the immediate future calls on Syria to ensure the very timely and swift extraction, even more so than ever before. We are hopeful that the 30th of June deadline will be met and that the final push will indeed achieve the complete progress that we're looking for.
On the ground, meanwhile, government forces are reported to have bombarded a town in Aleppo province, targeting rebel-held areas. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said several civilians were killed by the aerial bombardment. U.S. President Barack Obama's Asian tour continues with his stop in Malaysia. Obama met with Southeast Asian young leaders at a town hall meeting and said the United States is committed to helping maintain peace and stability in Asia. Also at a joint news conference with Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak, the U.S. President made clear that both leaders were in agreement on upgrading bilateral relations. Obama also touched upon the Ukraine crisis and the missing Malaysian jetliner. We get more details in this report.
It's a landmark visit aimed at transforming U.S. relations with Malaysia. Still, President Barack Obama's two-day tour has been overshadowed by the crisis in Ukraine and the missing Malaysia Airlines jet. At a news conference with the Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak, Obama said Europe and the US must join forces to impose sanctions on Russia to stop it destabilizing Ukraine. But any decision on punitive economic measures would depend on a consensus.
The notion that for us to go forward with sectoral sanctions on our own without the Europeans would be the most effective deterrent to Mr. Putin, I think is factually wrong. We're going to be in a stronger position to deter Mr. Putin when he sees that the world is unified and the United States and Europe is unified, rather than this is just a U.S.
During the conference, Obama didn't miss an opportunity to show the U.S. commitment to the search for the Malaysia Airlines Flight 370.
But I can tell you that the United States is absolutely committed to providing whatever resources and assets that we can, and that the Malaysian government has been very welcoming of that assistance.
The Malaysian jet disappeared more than 8 weeks ago, carrying 239 people on board. Obama's expected to discuss the search with Razak, but it will not be the only item on the agenda. The two leaders are expected to focus their talks on trade, defense, and maritime security.
Pope John XXIII and John Paul II were proclaimed saints in a historic double papal canonization in front of hundreds of thousands of pilgrims in the Vatican today. As he proclaimed his predecessors, Pope Francis hailed both as courageous men who withstood the tragedies of the 20th century. Relics of each man, a container of blood from John Paul II and skin from John XXIII, were placed near the altar. The Vatican said more than 800,000 people filled the basilica area, while another 300 watched the event on large television screens throughout Rome. About 850 cardinals and bishops celebrated the Mass with the Pope, and 700 priests were on hand to distribute communion to the huge crowd. A plethora of other dignitaries were also in attendance, ranging from Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe to the Spanish King and Queen and the Irish Prime Minister. South Africa marked 2 decades of multiracial democracy in their first Freedom Day since the passing of Nelson Mandela. The mood was somber just 10 days before elections expected to keep the African National Congress ANC party in power. Mandela's name was evoked several times by South Africa's current President Jacob Zuma, during a ceremony attended by around 5,000 people. Exactly 20 years ago, South Africans of all races voted in the country's first democratic election, bringing the ANC to power and making Mandela the country's first black president. The government can point to real successes such as a fast-growing black middle class and the laying of the foundation of a welfare state with about a third of the population now receiving monthly income grants.
We should congratulate ourselves for all this hard work. We must not deny or downplay these achievements, regardless of our political differences or contestation at any given time, including the election period. Facts should remain facts. Our country has done well. We all have a good story to tell.
In celebration of English playwright William Shakespeare's 450th birthday, his birthplace of Stratford was filled with thousands of visitors. The festivities began with the grand birthday procession, which sees bands and performers march through the town center, eventually ending with flowers being laid upon Shakespeare's grave. The ceremony also featured actors dressed as Shakespeare and many of his characters. According to the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, the tradition of celebrating the writer's birthday in Stratford dates back more than 100 years and attracts people from a wide range of industries, including literature, theater, and diplomacy. We start with NBA action. The Brooklyn Nets beat the Toronto Raptors 102-98 at Barclays Center in Game 3 of the Eastern Conference quarterfinals. Nets forward Joe Johnson scored 21 of his 29 points in the second half and continued his strong showing by shooting 11 of 17. The Nets sealed their win by getting 2 free throws by forward Paul Pierce, and Johnson sandwiched around a putback layup by forward Amir Johnson. Williams added 22 points and handed out 8 assists, while forward Pierce spearheaded the third quarter by contributing 8 of his 18. DeRozan led the Raptors with 30 points. Ajax Amsterdam captured their 4th successive Dutch League title and 33rd overall after a 1-1 draw with Heracles Almelo. Lasse Skone's early goal set up Ajax for an afternoon of celebration, but Simon Zommer's equalizer in the 22nd minute ensured a nervy finish as Ajax opened up an unassailable lead at the top of the table to seal the title. The draw moved Ajax to 70 points out of reach of the chasing pack. Ajax have 1 match remaining at home to strugglers NEC Nijmegen on Saturday. And finally, fair weather continues tonight with partly cloudy skies and northwesterly light to moderate winds. Tomorrow, a drop in temperatures expected, but it remains moderate in hilly areas and relatively hot in other parts of the kingdom. Winds will be northwesterly moderate, picking up at times. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect hot weather tomorrow, with northerly moderate winds picking up at times and slightly choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. All ministries, government departments, and public institutions will observe a holiday on Thursday, May 1st, on the occasion of Labor Day. The holiday was announced in a communique issued by Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour today. And now to end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King patronizes a ceremony in honor of the winners of the King Abdullah Prize for the World Interfaith Harmony Week, marked worldwide in the first week of February each year. Pope John XXIII and John Paul II are proclaimed saints in a historic double papal canonization in front of hundreds of thousands of pilgrims in the Vatican. And South Africa marks 2 decades of multiracial democracy in their first Freedom Day since the passing of Nelson Mandela. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.